Engaging with our complicated past helps us understand there is no them, there's only us, even when we disagree and are divided. For nearly 50 years, my films have explored American stories. I'm honored to announce that I will return to Gettysburg with my colleagues for a festival of screenings, conversations, and events that look at where we've been, where we are, and most important, of course, where we are going.
The Gettysburg Film Festival is April 5th, 6th, and 7th. For the full schedule and tickets, go to gettysburgfilmfestival.org.
Are you ready for your next great Civil War read? Then try the new historical novel, The Heavens Falling, by Jonathan Lucci. Follow the members of the Dawson family through the Civil War, from the halls of Congress to the bloody fields of battle, and from the decks of gunboats to the solitude of Lincoln's office. The Heavens Falling is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or visit theheavensfalling.com to order. That's theheavensfalling.com.
This episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you in part by me, audiobook narrator Mike Scott. Narrator of Savis Beattie's Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864, and Unlike Anything That Ever Floated, the Monitor and Virginia and the Battle of Hampton Roads. If you are an author or publisher interested in having your titles produced as audiobooks, or even just in learning more about the process, give me a shout. You can find my contact info on my website, MikeScottVoice.com. That's MikeScottVoice.com.
Want the freshest cup of coffee in Gettysburg? Then visit Bantam Roasters, formerly 82 Cafe at 82 Steinway Avenue. They roast all of their coffee in-house, and they have a full coffee bar to keep you caffeinated during your trip. Visit them at www.raggededgerc.com for their menu and shipping options for all of their freshly roasted coffee. Use promo code Hancock for 10% off your order in the cafe.
Hi, I'm Dale Fetzer, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
From the Gettysburg Museum of History Studios, you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Good evening, good morning, good day, whatever, wherever you are, whenever you're listening. Hello to you. How are you all doing? Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we are talking about a statuesque man. Well, he probably wasn't really statuesque. I've seen a photo of him, but he has a statue here at Gettysburg, I should say. And we all know him as Father William Corby. And our guest today is someone new to the show. It's his second time on the show, first time solo without Louis Trott holding his hand. No, he didn't need Louis holding his hand. But this is Kvin Bryant. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing wonderful.
Thank you very much for remembering to keep your voice high and not outshine the host.
Anything for you, Matt.
All right, you don't have to do that the whole time. It's going to be very tiring for you.
Oh, thank God.
How have you been?
I'm wonderful.
Good, good. How are things down in D.C.?
It's moving along. It's
good.
life.
Very nice. And remind us again, what park are you at?
So I'm at the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site.
Frederick Douglass National Historic Site. So if you ever get down there, ladies and gentlemen, look for Kevin. And you're also a licensed battlefield guide here at Gettysburg. So if you ever come to Gettysburg and you want to take a tour with a licensed battlefield guide with a soothing baritone, then, or is that a bass? Have you ever been classified? Well, let's deep voice, we'll say. Kvin Bryant is the man for you. All right, Kevin. So Father William Corby, how did we come about doing this? Was this your suggestion?
Yeah, I brought it up to you at one point.
And I guess you're a big Father Corby fan.
I love Father Corby.
Why do you love Father Corby?
I've always been drawn to him. I don't exactly know why. From one of my earliest visits to Gettysburg, a big thing that I just remember is the Father Corby statue.
Yeah.
It's coming as a kid.
And what was it that gave you the tingles about that?
I think maybe it was just the idea of something different on a battlefield.
Okay.
We come to battlefields and, we hear the stories of, marching by the flanks and firing and advancing and retreating. And then it was just kind of this moment of surprise. It was like, we've got this random, religious ceremony going on in the middle of all this. And it just really resonated with me in a way. And that was one of the earliest books on Gettysburg that I bought was Corby's Memoirs.
I wonder if it's maybe it might have been the first time that you saw troops or soldiers or armies as people. And it's a very human thing to, you're about to go into battle and you pray.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. This is a really humanizing moment.
A humanizing moment, yes.
No matter what your opinion on religion or a specific sect it is, whether in devotion to or avoidance of, religion is huge.
Yeah.
And by that point in, an auto tour, as you're going around, you've been out there for like an hour and a half or so. And
then you're saying, please, God, make this end.
Right, you're trying to get in. They're just like, okay, we're building up, we're getting to the violence there. And it's like, wait, why are they, what's that guy? It's just very, very strange.
Yeah.
But also beautifully located as well for interpretive purposes.
Oh, it's a great location for a statue. Yeah, and it's a cool statue, too. It's a long-bearded priest praying with his hand up in the air. What is it, his right hand?
Yeah.
Up in the air. So where was he born?
So he's born up in Detroit.
Yeah,
1833.
So he's not actually an Irishman. I mean, he's Irish descent, but he's not.
He would always consider, well, I shouldn't say he would, others would consider him more Catholic than Irish.
Ah.
So his father is born in Ireland, but had immigrated to Canada and later to America before Corby was even born.
Okay, gotcha.
His mother born here in America.
Oh, okay. So his mother married an Irish immigrant.
Yes.
Scandalous.
He's kind of wealthy by this point, though. So
okay. So not so that takes the scandal away.
Yeah, his dad's like a real estate transactor. He has a lot of wealth and property.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So born in Detroit, and then what's his early life like? Do we know much about it?
Yeah. So we know a lot based on what he is going to say with some other researchers. He's going to go just like a common school till he's 16 years of age. Then is going to get the basics of education, and he's going to follow his dad, work for him for 4 years in his real estate business.
Oh, very nice.
Cut his chops there, trying to transact buildings, sell property, construction, that sort of
thing. Yeah, I've always wanted to get into that, but I never did because I didn't want to go to school or take any classes.
Yeah.
You can't just get into things now. Used to be you just get into something and figure it out. Now you got to go through all these jump through all these hoops and everything.
Certificates.
Yeah, certificates, qualifications, licenses. Who needs it? So when did he get from real estate into the priesthood?
So that's about the age of 20. When he's 20 years old, he's going to go to Notre Dame. Because at that point, nothing like what we think of today.
Okay.
It's like a small French boys' boarding school.
Right.
Basically, a couple dozen students at it. And after his first year there, he's going to cement that he wants to do a life of ministry. Whether he had that before or not, we don't really know.
Was it a religious school?
Yeah.
It was? Did you say that already? I'm sorry if you did.
I don't know if I did or not. All right. It's founded by a guy named Father Sorin, who's going to be sent over from a village in France to the wilds of Indiana to try to set something up there with the idea you're going to set up this congregation, you're going to establish a stronger base of Catholicism in that area,
right?
And you're also going to be setting up some kind of a school and institution. And that becomes the seeds of what becomes Notre Dame. It's only a 10-year-old school when Corby goes to it.
Okay. So again, it's new.
Get all of the ideas of Notre Dame we have today out of our minds.
Right.
Like, that's not the school.
It's not a big football school.
It is not yet. No, they're more baseball.
So he studies for the priesthood there.
Yes.
Becomes a priest, and then what?
So he's rapidly going to accelerate up. He becomes very good friends. He gets significant mentorship from this Father Sorin. This guy is everything in his story, and he's going to help him advance through different levels. He's going to use some of his real estate. He's going to sell some or give some of the land to Notre Dame so it gets sold off. Ratchets up through, becomes a prefect of discipline, takes his final vows in 1860. So he is just emerging onto this, I don't know if professional ministry is the right term, but more or less right as the Civil War is busting out.
Vocational? Is it vocation? I don't know. Whatever,
he's
professional.
He's taking all those vows and things in 1860 and becomes not a teacher, but various administrative roles.
Right, okay.
In early Notre Dame by 1859, 1860, 1861.
So he's a student of Notre Dame, and then he ends up working at Notre Dame.
Yes.
All before the war. Okay,
correct.
So that's interesting, because I always thought he got involved with Notre Dame after the war.
His most famous involvement in Notre Dame will be after the war.
Right, but no. So he's been involved basically since he was a student. He never really left Notre Dame.
From the age of 20. Yeah.
Amazing, okay.
1853 till the war busts out. And it's the war busting out, which is what's going to pull him from Notre Dame. Because there's a couple other ministers who've left Notre Dame earlier to become chaplains. One of them, a guy named James Dillon, who's going to send back a message to, maybe to him, I'm not exactly sure. It might be also to Father Sorin, saying, we need more good Catholic chaplain men here in this army, and I'd really like Father Corby to come join me.
Right, okay.
Earliest.
So he's recruited almost. Yeah.
I don't know if he would have gone on his own, more or less, but
right.
He gets this invitation that comes here, and Father Sorin is desperately looking for opportunities to prove Catholic loyalty, patriotism. Because there's a lot of discrimination, other things that are at play with
nobody like the
real
Catholic.
Loyalty is to this foreign power over there in Vatican City.
Yeah.
And Father Sorin strongly leans towards the Union cause, But a brilliant thing, well, I don't know, I guess depending on your perspective. One of the great things he does at Notre Dame is he says, anybody can go fight for the armies. Students feel free to go enlist. We're not talking about it on campus, though. You do not bring it up, and if you do, there will be very strict discipline, very strict punishment. And as a result of that, Notre Dame remains with a school still operating during the war with both Northern and Southern students continuing to go together.
Really?
Because that understanding, if you talk about this stuff, like there's part of Corby's role, he's a prefect of discipline.
Right.
At one point where there's very specific regimented rules you have to follow. They have rules around like foot washing and things.
Of course they do.
Yeah, I mean, who
of course,
doesn't?
yeah.
Who among us does not?
Who among us does not have foot washing rules? Well, that is a helpful rule, though, because that is something we adopted with Addressing Gettysburg very early on before we even really did any public events, when we would have like a group chat on Instagram or something. There was one rule, and that was no modern politics. You could talk about 1860s politics, 1850s politics, but nothing modern. And we had a zero tolerance policy on that one there. It was just like, nope, we don't want it, because this is our escape from all that stuff.
Right.
And we try to, we might allude to certain things as a joke on this show, but we try to stay away from it, because we're all Americans, or people in the other countries. We're all people that are interested in good stories, and the history of Gettysburg has good stories. And so why do we need to ruin it with politics and everything like that? So that's a good rule to have.
We can call it the Notre Dame rule.
The Notre Dame, I like that. Now we're going to call it the Notre Dame rule from now on. Henceforth, it is now known as the Notre Dame rule. All right. So the war. Well, anything interesting happened in the 1850s while he's there?
Going on at Notre Dame?
Yeah. I mean, anything with him, or just something.
So there's
of
a
note?
lot that honestly we don't know about what goes on, because there are very few sources informing us on his life in general, but especially that younger period.
Okay.
So the main thing that I think is important for us to take away is how closely related and affiliated he is with Father Sorin. This is huge before the war. It's going to be big in the war, and it's going to be huge after the war. It's going to be a common thread that we're coming back to. Remember, we got this guy right there who's basically taken Corby under his wing and is like, this is my protege, more or less. Like, you're all good. He's responsible. He's got huge ecclesiastical responsibilities within the Catholic Church. Saying like, Corby's kind of my guy. He's like, he's my top lieutenant general, moving around here. So whatever I want when I have a hard moment, Corby is the guy to pull from. And that's going to be part of why he's going out to be a chaplain. It's going to be part of why he comes back later, and everything that I'm sure we'll dive into.
And with Father Corby, my old war horse, we will prevail. So the war breaks out. Does he? Now you said that. Who was it that wrote?
So James Dillon is his name. Yeah. So he's another of those fathers coming from Notre Dame. So he was the chaplain of, I think it's the 63rd New York there. Yeah. So he's already in what we'll know as the Irish Brigade.
Right.
We need more good Irish men. Corby's going to come out, become the chaplain of the 88th New York.
Even though he's only half Irish.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. So he goes
more
out.
Catholic than Irish, that common thread.
So he goes out to help with the 88th, you said?
Yeah, the 88th New York. Yeah, he's going to go up to Chicago, hop on a train, take that train journey all the way across. This is my first time out east. And he's going to arrive trying to find his camp, which is in Alexandria, Virginia, but he doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't have, he's going in as a chaplain, not as a commissioned officer.
Right.
So there are different roles. There's very unclear.
Right, they haven't really figured out the whole chaplain role yet.
So he gets into town, what today we'd know as D.C., and he's like, I guess I'll just go to the Catholic churches and try to find somebody who can connect me with something. Yeah. And eventually, through some of those ministers, there they find him. He gets to his camp, and he says, I'm here for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, till death do us part. He considers it like a marriage.
He's married to the army,
like, I am in the army till the end, no matter what it takes. And
that's a committed man.
It's a fitting kind of condition to be going into it.
It's interesting. It's funny how these things go, because we maybe a month ago recorded a show about Civil War chaplains. So, and that's for Patreon. So I think I'm going to release that the same week I release this one here, so that there's kind of like a theme, and that's like the chaplain week. All right, so he goes immediately after the war opens. He goes, or it's in 1861, right?
Yeah. So he enlists December 15th of 1861 is what's on.
Okay, so
I don't know if enlistment's the right term, but
but
when he signs the paperwork,
yeah,
that puts him into the army.
All right, so end of 1861.
So the only major battle, then I should say, that he would acknowledge missing is first Bull Run.
Okay.
Other stuff since then, he's going to be in some capacity in all of it.
Right, okay. And I think I heard a story. No, I know I heard a story that during the Battle of Antietam, here at Gettysburg, we know the story of him standing on a boulder and giving final absolution to the Irish Brigade as they go in.
Yeah.
But at Antietam, tell us the story about Antietam.
Yeah, the story of Antietam, that needs its own little statue. That's the real vibrant statue.
Why
of
isn't
Father
there
Corby,
a statue of him on a horse down there?
Yeah, so the story goes, as the Irish Brigade is moving in, Father Corby is there riding on a horse. Like, the Irish Brigade is moving forward at kind of like a double quick, not just walking. And so he's galloping along with them on horseback, giving this final absolution to them as he's just riding up and down the line, back and forth. Like, his beard blowing in the wind, all these sorts of things.
A perfect target.
It's like our Longstreet statue here, except he's got like his right hand up, and the horse in mid gallop stream.
That thing that the priests put around their necks, fluttering in the breeze and everything. Yeah,
it's a much more dynamic moment. Not to try to take away from what happened here, but visually compelling. It's the idea of just this chaplain riding frantically with everything flying around him.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Is like when I heard that story, I was just astonished that there isn't something to commemorate that there, or that's not a more popular story than, the Gettysburg story. I mean, the Gettysburg story, there's still stuff flying all over the place, but like he's in a safer position and the men are going off and he's saying, all right, see ya,
And when we hear the Gettysburg story too, often it's kind of portrayed by witnesses or others as this is the first time, on the American continent this has ever happened. And being the same guy just did some similar stuff in Antietam just a couple months ago.
Yeah, right.
But it's that thing, you want to cement it like we have the first. We have this dynamic moment.
Well, that's the thing, is everybody's vying for the first or the best or the biggest or the bloodiest or the whatever. Yeah. But no, that is a fascinating story, because he didn't have to do that as a chaplain. It's not anywhere in, well, of course, the duties weren't really clear, but you certainly do not have to ride up and down the line. Were they in column marching too, or were they in battle line?
So my understanding is they're in battle line.
So he's riding across the face of the battle line.
There's some differing accounts on that. Okay. That he might be in front of, he might be behind.
He probably went both.
I think he's all over the place. If he's trying to cover as many people as he possibly can. Right. Irish Brigade would have been a little bit bigger than we'd know him being at Gettysburg, so that takes some more time.
If I recall from Catholic school, when the priest puts his hand up, the range on the absolution that he gives with that raised hand is only about 12 feet. So he'd have to probably ride up and down the line. He couldn't just stand there and go, and then, you get 1,000 men or whatever it is, all absolved. So you'd have to go up there. And I made that up about the 12 feet.
But this sort of thing is exactly what sets Father Corby aside from so many other chaplains in the war. Not that he's exclusively this way, but so few chaplains are remembered favorably by the soldiers who serve with them. And with this unclear understanding of the official duties of a chaplain in the military, it requires the chaplain to self-select a lot of their work, and so much of that work is derived from the respect that you have built with the soldiers.
Okay.
And if you have no respect with the soldiers, as some chaplains would, like they couldn't care less about you. You're just that fifth wheel annoying them on the army. If you're someone like Father Corby, you are diving into their life. You are every bit a part of the marches, of the struggles, of the hunger, of the bullets, of the death, and you're right there by their side in every moment they need. Like, Father Corby gets celebrated in a way that maybe most other chaplains don't, because the men respected him for moments just like this.
Because he practiced what he preached.
He's in the middle of everything good and bad. He's not just sitting in the back saying, all right, y'all come see me on Sunday. I'll be sitting here in my little tent.
He's tending to his flock.
He's all up in their business, whether they want him to be or not.
Right.
And he feels that's a part of his, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
From his perspective, is to tend to every single affair these men may need, including combat. And one of the things soldiers are going to give him is letters, money, things like that, to be sent in the event of my death sort of idea. And there's this prominent moment where one officer is going to give him some money to send to his father if something happens to him. And the soldier sees him during combat, sees Father Corby out there on the battlefield with the bullets and things zipping around. And he's like, he basically says to him, give me the stuff back because it's safer with me.
Yeah.
Because I gave it to you because I thought you were guaranteed to survive.
You were going to be all right, yeah.
Even if we get massacred, you'll survive because you'll be, hanging out in the back behind the lines. Okay, I just want it back.
Yeah.
Father Corby's taking all these risks. He describes, the bullets whizzing past him, artillery is raining around him, and many times he comes under fire directly on a few occasions throughout the war. He's not hiding in the rear, just waiting for us to come back with wounded and to confess our sins before we go out.
Now I'm starting to see why you're fascinated by this guy.
He's incredible.
Yeah.
He's incredible. And part of what I love is he comes back much, much later and writes his memoir. And as he writes his memoir, the constant thread that even Irish Brigade veterans are commenting on about his memoir is This is something in Civil War historiography that does not exist anywhere else. It is a look not just at a chaplain's life, but it's a look at the underbelly of our entire army. It's our full, authentic lives that he has captured. The deepest, darkest moments of everything we went through. Corby has written about it in here, and he doesn't talk about the battles much. He says, that's covered everywhere. There's no shortage of people wanting to write about it. And he calls those of us who like battles something like the morbid tastes of the public or something like that is the phrase that he uses. Certain people want the blood and the violence. Says, that's not what I'm here for. Everywhere else talks about that. I want to tell you about this man right here named Thomas. I want to tell you about this man named Samuel. I want to tell you about this person being executed by a court-martial. I want to tell you all of these very intimate moments of people dying on a battlefield, hearing confessions. I want to tell you about us starving. He has these such visual moments of, the army's on the march. He's going to say, in the morning, all you hear is just people talking along on the march. But by the evening, it's just complete silence as these columns just keep going. It's just bringing life to these everyday trivial moments. But for people looking back later in history, maybe we don't find those as interesting. But for the soldiers living it, that's, 95, 96, 97% of their experience.
Right.
It's just these journeys of walking and seeing people dropping down with malaria, seeing the dead being buried, hearing the rifle fire going over as yet another grave has been dug and is being marked. And this is part of what Corby leaves behind for us. And in my opinion alone, I think what he writes in his memoir is the single greatest example of just the authentic Army experience that we have in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody's going to agree with that, I'm sure, but I think it's so vibrant. And even the officers in his unit, when he publishes this, are going to describe that this doesn't exist anywhere else. There's nothing like this in the war studies to that moment in time.
Well, you know what I find interesting, and parents especially, pay attention to this as I stumble through what I'm trying to think and say at the same time. So you, as a kid, come here and you see the Father Corby statue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something in your brain says,
It stuck out.
It stuck out, right? And so you start to look, and before you said it's a humanizing moment, right? The thought of people taking the time to pray before they go into battle, right? Now, how old were you, 10-ish?
I don't know. I think I was probably 11, maybe.
Oh, okay, so 10 or 11. Like I'll guarantee you, full-grown adults might hear the story, like see that statue and hear the story, and they would even go, I never thought of that. I never thought that they would stop and pray and things like that, right?
It snaps you away first.
Yeah, and now you're seeing these as people, not, blocks on a map. Right. These are human beings that are going and doing something very horrible and dreadful. But here, so you, as an 11-year-old, you see this, and it just kind of makes you go, And I don't know how long it is before you read your first book about Father Corby, but in doing so, you find out all about him. And as you just said to us, he humanized the troops when he would talk about them. He said, I'm not talking about the blood and the gore. That's other people. Leave that to I'm going to tell you about the boy who was confessing as he died, and these human moments that I witnessed and shared with these men as they went off into those bloody battles that you love hearing about from these other sources. Yeah. And so it very much like Father Corby is and was a humanizing figure, both figuratively and actually.
Completely. Yeah. He brings this place to life.
Yeah.
It is so easy for us, whether we're on the battlefield with a licensed guide, whether we're listening to a podcast, whether we're just reading books, to hear these numbers and these percentages. And without even intending to do it, we turn these human beings into nameless, faceless masses of hordes, just slaughtering each other indiscriminately. And we talk about the tactics, and we lose the fact that, it doesn't matter which side, whether you have loyalty one way or another. These are people.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with what they fought for or not is somewhat irrelevant for this specific moment of the conversation.
Sure.
Like, these are fundamental people. They had names. They had hopes. They had dreams. Whether family or not, they had someone waiting on them back home. Family, friend, coworker, classmate, etc.
Sheriff.
Sheriff. And they all had hopes and dreams. And I would venture to say almost none of them had a hope and dream that involved dying in some random town in Pennsylvania they'd never heard of before.
No, excuse me. Excuse me, my allergies are acting up today. You're right. Nobody has that desire to die on some foreign farm field in another state or another country. We talked about Antietam. We talked about Gettysburg. Well, we didn't talk enough about Gettysburg, though. Go into the story of Gettysburg for the people that don't know.
Right.
Okay, never been here, never saw the statue, never read about him, never heard about him. Why do we have a statue to him? What did he do here?
Yeah, so for Father Corby coming into Gettysburg with the Irish Brigade, every regiment is supposed to have a chaplain in it. By the time of Gettysburg, he's the only chaplain left.
So the Irish Brigade, let's talk about that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
When they are mustered into service, how many men do they have?
Maybe about 4,000 or
4,000 men. So 4 regiments at 1,000 each, roughly. I mean, on
More
paper, that's how that would translate, but that's not necessarily.
5 regiments, but
okay. So
Corby describes it in his words as 4,000 marching Catholics is a phrase that he's going to give at the start.
Okay. Now, by Gettysburg,
we're looking at maybe 530, 532, something like that.
I always see 550.
It's somewhere, again, numbers.
A large regiment is what they've been whittled down to, basically.
Yeah, and most of the regiments, remembering that that's like 5 regiments we're talking about comprising it. Some regiments are the size of, a little bit oversized companies.
Companies.
In a traditional sense. So the Irish Brigade has seen a lot in this moment.
Now, okay, because we always get into this, and I like to point this out. When I just did a show for Patreon about the 17th Connecticut. And they came into the service, I think it was September of 62, by with 1,000 men. By Gettysburg, they had 300 something. And the only battle they were in was Chancellorsville. So they didn't lose 700 men in Chancellorsville.
Right.
It was, disease, all the other typical things. So with the Irish Brigade, though, the whole brigade going from 4,000 to 500 and change in a couple of years. Did they get hit with some kind of outbreak of smallpox or something along the way, or
how did it get so small?
Was it because I always I don't know where I got this, but I was always under the assumption that they didn't like the Irish, so it's like, well, we got something tough to do, send the Irish first and whittle them down, use them as cannon fodder.
The Irish do certainly get hammered in several battles.
Yeah.
They suffer significantly at Antietam. They suffer significantly at Fredericksburg. I would preface this by saying, well, I consider myself an expert in Father Corby. I would not consider myself an expert on the broader Irish Brigade itself, so some of those folks may be cringing
for this
moment. But you get so much of the unglamorous moments in the broader war that I think likely impacted the Irish Brigade's retraction in size, sickness, disease.
Yeah, so same as everybody else.
That would be what I would imagine in lack of being more specific of an expert.
I mean, typically that seems to be the answer when I ask the question.
Yeah,
but the Irish Brigade
600
seems
guys shot down.
Yeah, but the Irish Brigade though seems a little extreme to be whittled down to a large regiment size.
They're small. They're very small.
But okay, so go ahead. Finish the story. Yeah. You don't remember where he left off, do you?
I don't at all. No.
So we're talking about Gettysburg. Father Corby, what he did. The Irish Brigade's going in.
Oh yeah. So Father Corby is the only chaplain left with the Irish Brigade.
Yeah.
Out of these 5 regiments, and not only is he the only Catholic chaplain with the Irish Brigade, by this point in time, he's the only Catholic chaplain in the entire Army of the Potomac.
Oh.
So this for him. He's going to describe this. This is very problematic because this makes him basically another reason why I think history centers on him so much in moments like this. He is the entirety of organized Catholic life for this total army of 90 to 100,000 men.
And
you're looking for him,
right? And you're saying specifically a Catholic chaplain. He's not the only chaplain left in the army,
correct?
But he's the only Catholic.
The only Catholic
right?
Chaplain.
Okay,
yeah, that's an important thing to highlight.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means for Father Corby is, even though he's traveling still with the 88th New York, the broader Irish Brigade, he gets calls from the entire army. From any Catholic soldier and some non-Catholic soldiers, anybody who wants the business of a Catholic priest, yeah. They're pulling on him, so his duty is to the entire army, even though he's traveling with the Irish Brigade itself. So it makes it much more complicated for him, adding to his exhaustion. He's all over the army anytime someone calls. He knows this is their chance for this broader sense of communion with the divine. They need me in that theological understanding. So he sails in, but in the journey to Gettysburg, they've been moving so fast, the portion of the army that he's with, that he hasn't had time for proper religious ceremonies with them. So they haven't had any of their high masses, military masses. He hasn't had the opportunities he would desire for confession for everybody, all this stuff.
Yeah.
That is a part of who he is. So he's feeling his army, or his Irish Brigade, very spiritually vulnerable. as they enter Gettysburg, because you would want to have these communal opportunities to come together and share our faith and go through our commitments and our atonement and all this sort of stuff. We can't do any of that. So last 13-mile journey, getting up here into Gettysburg, coming in with Hancock's Corps, settle in on July 2nd. Well, they arrive July 1st, but they're going to settle into the position that we would know them on July 2nd. And he's going to describe being able to look over to Seminary Ridge and seeing Confederates like moving around in there, seeing their orderlies going back and forth. So you can see like, this is real.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Right.
It's not just some battle we're emerging in the aftermath of. Like, they're still right there. He's yet again basically on the front line as July 2nd arises. And nobody knows what July 2nd is going to bring. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know what July 2nd is going to bring. But for Father Corby, deepest on his mind in this moment, the boys haven't had that broader... Forget, as important as military role is, as important as their service, their obedience, their discipline, all of that is for Father Corby, I think he's looking at a much more significant item of importance is live or die, victory or defeat in the war. That's one thing, but his perspective, I'm looking at eternity for these men.
And a lot of them are going to meet it today.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if they're going into eternity, we need to make sure, I need to do everything I can to make sure they have a fair chance at entering the eternity that I would hope for them to be entering into. And as their chaplain, due to responsibilities and keeping the Army moving and not slowing things down, I haven't had the opportunity to be the chaplain that they deserved in these last few days, at least. And we got to fix this because we might be entering a lot of bloodletting.
Yeah.
And I think that's deep on his mind as orders and things are trickling around the early afternoon.
Somebody get me a boulder.
Find me a boulder.
That's what he's saying.
And this is where all the controversy starts around when he did it, what he did. So kind of to go into the real quick glimpse at things, and maybe we can dissect it from there, perhaps. Okay. The story as we all hear it, Father Corby, late afternoon, July 2nd. The battle is underway, long streets, just hammering the left side of the Union Army, and it's growing in the direction of Caldwell's 2nd Corps, where Corby is placed with the broader Irish Brigade. And hearing the violence going, knowing it's likely their time coming with the sound of explosions in the distance, he's going to climb up on a boulder, gather the Irish Brigade around him, and give them final absolution, this ritual, this rite for preparation for the afterlife, basically, like you're about to die sort of thing if you receive this, a forgiveness of sins.
Right.
And then they motor off and go join that battle. In reality, the story feels like a lot more complicated than kind of the simplified version as we hear. Corby and others is going to put it as happening right around that time when they're about to move forward, about 4 p.m. or so. St. Clair Mulholland puts it there. Now, describes the artillery exploding all around them. You could hear it growing. The battle was underway. It says, it gave more fitting music than any cathedral hall would have. It's the sound of people are dying near us, and in that environment.
Hell. It's the sound of hell.
There.
Yeah.
Yes, and as no doubt in his understanding, many people are going there. From he's hoping to minimize, again, in his understanding of what's unfolding in that moment. There are others, though, who witnessed the event who describe it happening much earlier in the day.
Okay.
Which logically perhaps makes a little more sense, because it seems strange if the most popular account that most of us know of Father Corby is written or spoken by St. Clair Mulholland, who is the regimental leader of, I think, the 116th Pennsylvania. Yeah. So he gives us the most famous account that we've all heard of. I wasn't there. I don't know what really happened or not. But there are some others from Zook's Brigade and a few others in the 2nd Corps who describe also witnessing at a distance, but that happened, maybe even in the morning of July 2nd, or some push it 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock there, not with things actively flying around everybody.
Right. And it always, the thought of them taking a pause on the way down to help out on the south end doesn't sound plausible to me, because it's an emergency. Why are you, And
we remember who's in charge of that corps overall, and supposedly, according to the accounts, General Hancock is going to witness this event. And can we imagine General Hancock, with everything we talk about him doing on July 2nd, saying, everybody move, wait, okay, pause for 5 minutes, gentlemen.
Take off my hat.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's give a respectful moment. It's like, maybe, again, I can't say yes or no, but it doesn't quite pass the smell test at first glance.
I agree with you. I think that... the type of guy Hancock was. First, I don't believe the movie depiction of it is
not remotely.
Is the way it was.
Not remotely.
No, I can't imagine Hancock, rushing troops down there in this emergency situation, and then he himself takes a pause and allows the Irish Brigade to pause, let alone himself. Right, so I agree. It has to be prior to the fight, and they had all morning to do it.
Right.
It's not like this happens at dawn, the fighting.
Right. And from Corby's acknowledgement of what he could see over there, he knows the Confederate army is still there.
Right. So it's late in the day.
You can deduce, I haven't had a chance to take care of their spiritual needs for some time, where nothing significant on our front is happening right now. It's likely going to have something happen later.
Mm-hmm.
A plus B equals 3. Maybe now is my chance.
Right.
To kind of seize this opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not as vibrant of a moment, but again, where that becomes trouble is both Corby himself and St. Clair Mulholland put it closer to when the violence is breaking out.
Right.
Which, it's hard to argue with the people who were some of the most prominent folks involved in it, but how much was their influence, being carried forth by conversations with each other, things off the record, post-war stuff. So simply put, we don't know when it happened throughout the day, even though for simplicity's sake, it's often simplified.
Right.
As they're just about to go out into the battle in minutes, and that very well may be the truth. We just don't know.
We just don't know.
Just like we also don't know where it happened.
So that was my next question. Is the boulder that he's standing on today the boulder he stood on back then?
According to all official auto tours, yes. That is the boulder. According to all tradition, yes. That is the boulder. According to source material, we have no idea.
We have no idea.
But
do we even know that he was on a boulder?
Yes, we do.
Okay, he was on a boulder.
So I should say that same source from Corby and St. Clair Mulholland that's going to describe the time that it's happened, he also self-describes climbing on top of a large boulder. What we don't know is that the specific boulder? And honestly, I think probably not.
So Mulholland didn't say anything just slightly south of the New York Auxiliary Monument, nothing like that.
Unfortunately, he doesn't use some of those corroborating landmarks for him, pesky guy. He needs to go back and revise that.
They put them there so that the troops knew where to go, and he doesn't even mention them.
Yeah, so we know, according to what I think is the most likely accounts, aside from the time, he is on a boulder.
Okay.
Because he has to be visible. I think it's much more likely that instead of the boulder we see him on today, it's probably a boulder that doesn't exist anymore. It's probably one over in the direction of the Pennsylvania Memorial.
Now, why? Okay, so you think it might be under where the Pennsylvania Monument is now?
Where the Pennsylvania Monument is now. There used to be, understanding, some boulders there, as well as a little rise in the ground. That was all cleared and kind of flattened. The landscape was altered.
I was not aware of that.
Memorial is.
I did not know that.
Yes.
That's interesting.
I should say, I'm fairly confident that's true. Maybe somebody's squeezing their steering wheel really tight right now. So the landscape around the Pennsylvania.
How is this guy a licensed guide and I failed it 4 times?
Yeah, no, you can put in those petitions to make me have to retake the test.
Yeah.
And if you look at the battlefield maps or things of the rough position of Caldwell's division, of which Corby with others would be a part of, it puts some more where that Pennsylvania Memorial is today, in that general vicinity. And the only way then for Corby to have been able to get to the location of where his monument is, you'd have had to pull this whole brigade out of their ordered position, swing them around, Cross, I think, who would be the one on the extreme left side of Caldwell, swing them down a couple hundred yards past the rest of the division to get to that boulder.
Right.
Is it possible? Sure. Is it logical? Not so much.
Right.
So the only way I can rationalize it in my mind, and again, just my mind, is that it might be the original boulder is if, hypothetically speaking, that boulder was moved from the Pennsylvania Memorial to its current location. Again, I don't think that's terribly likely. But to me, that's the only way I can make sense of it possibly being the boulder. It cannot be in that spot on that boulder.
So you think that boulder was moved there, or was it?
That's not what I'm saying.
I'm
saying the only way I can make logic that it might be the original boulder is if that boulder was moved.
Gotcha.
But I think if that boulder was moved, we'd probably find some more threads of that.
Some record of it.
Newspapers, things like that. So people would have mentioned, because that's a big process, moving
a boulder, yeah.
So again, my opinion, I don't think it's the original boulder. I don't think it's the correct spot. But if it was, the boulder had to be moved. Because to me, I think we're about 500 yards to south of where it most likely happened, somewhere in the Pennsylvania.
And with most of the monuments and memorials here, they're roughly in the area of where these troops were or where these people were. Obviously not the same spot.
And when the Corby Monument is being placed, this is during the period where a lot of the early work on the Pennsylvania Memorial is happening anyway. So even if they were intending to mark the original spot, if anybody even remembered the original spot, there's likely a whole lot of activity going on there in changing the landscape and getting these infrastructure. So it might not have even been an option. But again, the historic record doesn't give us, to the best of my knowledge, a lot of specific details.
Right, so we don't have anybody at the dedication giving a speech saying, now, while this actually occurred 500 yards to our north.
Yeah,
with nothing like that. That would have been nice.
As far as I know.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Okay. So, all right. So then, anything else during the battle besides giving the final absolution? Anything else that he did that might have been of note or anything?
So his description, again, going back to some of his emphases of not talking about battles, that's really the only thing he narrates in his memoir of his. And even when he narrates that, he doesn't narrate it. He describes it very briefly, giving the setup for the events on July 2nd. And then he transitions and says, I shall now quote from St. Clair Mulholland, who speaks more. And he uses Mulholland's account published in his memoir with a few moments before and after it. So even Corby doesn't really give us a whole lot. The best clues that sometimes we get in this is an 1879 letter that he's going to write to John Batchelder. Batchelder is going to kind of pick his brain and be like, can you tell me exactly what you said when you're up on that rock? And that's really the only time that I've ever uncovered that he gets into some of the details.
And what does he say?
I got the whole text.
You got the whole text?
So give me a moment, just scroll.
How long is it?
Oh, it's not terribly long at all.
Yeah, because, I mean, these guys got to go fight a battle.
But it speaks to volumes as well that by that period in time, even it's 1879 when the letter comes, even John Batchelder and others, people are still talking about this thing that Father Corby did on July 2nd.
Really?
Enough that they know to ask him about it.
Huh.
So John Batchelder's going to send us thing being like, I know this moment happened to you. I've heard other people talk about this. Can you tell me exactly what you said? And Father Corby is going to write him back. I think it's was it January 4th, 1879. Says, I can't tell you exactly what I said, but I'm going to give you the best kind of
gist.
Yeah. This is going to capture the spirit of what I said here. And he says he stepped in the front of the battle line and addressed the men and officers in substance as followed. And this is where his quote enters. We need the sound of like cannons exploding or something in the background.
Hold on, I could probably do that.
Oh.
I could probably get that for you. I could add it later if you want.
My dear Christian friends, in consideration of the want of time for each one to confess his sins in due order as required for the reception of the sacrament of penance, I will give you general absolution. But, my dear friends, while we stand here and in the presence of eternity, so to speak, with a well-armed force in front and with missiles of death in the form of shells bursting over our heads, we must humble ourselves before our great Creator of all men and acknowledge our great unworthiness and conceive a heartfelt sorrow for the sins by which we have ungratefully offended the divine author of all good things. Him whom we ought to love, we have despised by sinning against his laws. Him who we have honored by lives of virtue, we have dishonored by sin. We stand in debt to our great Lord and Master. He loves us, but we by sin have forfeited that love. Now to receive a full pardon for our sins and regain the favor of God, we do not think it is sufficient to get the priest's absolution. It is true as a minister of God, he has received the power to pronounce your sins absolved. Whose sins you shall forgive, they are forgiven. John 20:23. By virtue of the power given the apostles and their lawful successors, the priest acts. But the absolution pronounced by the priest or by St. Peter himself would be worthless, unless the penitent conceives a true sorrow for his sins, which sorrow should include a firm determination never more to willfully offend and to do in all his power to atone for the past sins. Therefore, my dear friends, in the solemn presence of eternity, excite in your minds a deep sorrow for all sins, negligence, and transgressions of your past lives. Rend your hearts and not your garments, and I, the consecrated minister of God, will give you general absolution. And then he describes people falling on their knees after that, and then goes into the Latin, which I won't completely destroy.
Yeah. That's a lot. It's pretty specific for a gist.
It is. Yeah, you expect something generic. Like, I told them, they needed to repent.
Yeah. Right, exactly. That's
which,
what I would
to
have
me,
done.
maybe speaks to the idea that this is purely theoretical, but maybe Corby had something of a kind of traditionary sort of script, more or less.
Yeah,
that
probably.
he drew from,
right,
in these sorts of ideas.
I'm sure he said the same thing often.
Across many general absolutions or specific absolutions. This was kind of the pattern, the words that I used. So.
Yeah.
And again, 1879, so 16 years after the battle. Is going to write that.
Yeah, I can't remember what I said 16 minutes after I say it, so he probably added a lot there if he didn't have a standard thing that he would say.
And again, people are already asking him, and other people are still talking about it.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form, even if it hadn't been written down as far as we know.
Yeah.
There's enough out there. I'm sure he shared the stories with students or others who would be picking his brain.
Absolutely. All right, so after Gettysburg.
Yeah, he continues with the Irish Brigade, or what's left of the even smaller Irish Brigade.
What do you remember off the top of your head what casualties they took? I could look it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think they have something like 27 dead and 100 something wounded.
Yeah.
Something of that nature.
Go ahead. Tell the story.
Which is still pretty significant given, again, remembering how small they are at that point coming in. He's going to take off. There's not big involvement on the 3rd. He doesn't describe. Again, there's so many gaps that Corby leaves for us that other scholars of the Irish Brigade would easily probably fill in to give more detail, but that's not Corby's focus. His focus is the spiritual condition of the men.
Sorry to interrupt you. So 532 is the strength they come in with. They lose 198. So basically 200. Jesus.
That's significant. So whether we've got this final absolution happening a few hours beforehand or a few minutes beforehand, it is still reaching that critical mass reaching that pivotal moment in his journey that I'm going to lose a lot of people here. And my responsibility is for their eternal condition. And on that understanding, this is what I have to do.
Right.
This is that necessary step. And the tolls grow. So much loss here. And Father Corby is then very frequently present at hospitals. The thing is, not everybody dies on the field, as we know. And he never wants one of his soldiers or others to pass or be suffering without his presence there, further adding to the endless exhaustion of pinging around as best you can, while also then accompanying the pursuing soldiers when people start marching out.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be like... you have to. You're basically he. It sounds like he sees himself as mommy and daddy, and Jesus Christ.
He's the connection to home,
and to God.
Yeah.
So he's everything for these guys, or he sees himself as that.
Right, and I think that makes complete sense for him because in that understanding, he is kind of that vessel that connects the divine to humanity.
Right.
But he's also the very tangible vessel that connects so many of these men to home and communities. As he's passing the letters back and forth, he's passing the money back and forth, the trinkets, all these things, and he receives letters back. If you pass away, if you die in service or in a hospital, Father Corby is the one writing that letter to your family, updating them on all that specifics there, and then receiving those letters back. He's the telegram. More or less,
that's got to take such a toll.
Tremendously so. It has to be so hard for him on that personal level to be carrying all this up, and nobody wants to see their chaplain struggling.
No,
this is our source of strength. This is the rock, because I've got this sense of this broader force that I can go through this horror. Because even if the worst hits me, according to what he is telling me and what I believe and what he's telling me, there's still something. There's the pearly gates. Something are awaiting.
Yeah.
At the end.
It's somebody. So I've always been kind of the kind of guy that like people come to and dump their problems on. And I'll sit and talk and, whatever, try to give them advice. But what the hell do I know about anything? But they come to me for some reason. And somebody finally asked, no one ever asked this until about like a year ago. And they're like, so you got all these people coming and dumping their shit on you. It's like, who do you dump your shit on? And I was like, nobody unless I have the money to pay someone,
Yeah.
And so it is hard. But what I have to deal with is nothing compared to what this guy had to deal with.
Sure.
So I can't imagine how he can deal with the sorrow and the heartbreak of war and the horror of it and all the ways that it personally affects him, and then deal with these men within their final moments writing these letters home to their mothers. And Father Corby had a mother, and I'm sure it made him think about his mother, and just all these things. And that's got to take such a toll on you. To who did he have to talk to besides God?
Yeah, so certainly God, I think, is where he would draw his biggest strength from. Again, you don't get into that line of work without complete, full conviction.
Absolutely.
Into what you are doing.
Yeah.
Like hook, line, and sinker.
Well, you could be a shyster. There's some of those out there.
Father Corby is not that.
No,
we will not get that hashtag.
He is the real deal for sure.
He absolutely is. And I think the biggest place, other than kind of this divine spiritual nature that he'd be drawing things from, is other chaplains who would have been near him. Because they would have been working together for these masses or things. But remembering by this period, we're talking Gettysburg, he's the only Catholic chaplain present here. So others may have different understandings, but that's still not quite the same understanding of Christianity.
Sure, but they all have the same understanding of what they're experiencing.
Yes.
So he could talk to them about that. So that would be that. He could probably, maybe all the chaplains got together on Tuesday nights, played pinochle a little bit, and talked about whatever the problems were that they were going through. I also think he
would be a little bit lonely in this respect, though, because, again, remembering the pressures against Catholicism at the time, even many of the other Protestant chaplains, Corby does not speak about this, I want to be clear. This is just me supposing they're based on broader trends. Corby may not have been as welcome in many of the settings of other chaplains.
So I'm going to push back on that. Here, I'm going to push back, and here's why. At first, yay, but ultimately, I don't think so, because I think from I've never been in war, but from what I understand from people who have been, you might have those problems. Like take any Vietnam War movie you've seen, okay, and you have like when the guys all meet at boot camp or whatever, and there's like the two black guys, and they're not treated well, and there's a tension and everything like that. But then when they get into the jungle and they go through the shit, all of a sudden they're all brothers. And that all went away. That's back in the States. But right here, right now, we're all family here. And I don't think that's Hollywood. I think that's a real human thing that happens when you go through an experience like war or any kind of tragic experience with people. All that bullshit that society made you think about other people is wiped away. Mm-hmm. And you just... You're like, nah, man, like we've been through the same shit and nobody understands me and nobody understands you like we do each other. And so we're cool. We're coup de la.
So I hear what you're saying, and let me tell you why you're wrong. No, I do think there's a lot of truth.
Maybe I'm romanticizing it.
And I'll just pull straight from Corby's writing to one specific example, not saying that negates by any means what you say.
Sure.
But he's got a whole chapter in his memoir that he calls The Execution. And the execution is one of the many times he was personally dealing with a soldier who had been condemned to death and kind of his private moments leading up there. And this was the very first time he experienced this. He was not the chaplain assigned to the condemned soldier. There was a Protestant chaplain there. He doesn't even give his name. Because even apparently many of the soldiers there didn't even know what this chaplain's name was. They just called him Boots because of the boots that he wore. I guess he had big old boots on.
All right, sure.
And so Boots shows up. And he's kind of doing some of the things with this guy, but he's not really deeply engaged in, as far as Corby's concerned, in what this man really needs. So Corby
going through the motions.
Yeah, Corby self-selects to go, like, I heard someone's being condemned. I heard they're going to be executed. I want to go make sure their spiritual condition is solid. He didn't know Boots or anybody else was involved in this. And he goes in and starts kind of meeting with the man, has some talk with him. Have you practiced an act of contrition? Are you a good Catholic man? Do you need confession? All of these sorts of things. And the soldier that he's talking to knew nothing. Basically about Catholicism in general. And Corby talks about, do you have a chaplain who's been helping you? And he's like, oh, there's kind of this guy. This guy's not really doing anything. And Corby has issues with this guy, Boots, when he comes back in, who's, again, a Protestant chaplain responsible for this. And they're having these issues on basically, what are you doing? Like, why are you not taking care of the necessary needs of this man? And the guy's just like, well, if he just, ask for forgiveness real quick, like he'll be good. And Corby's like, no, he needs baptism. He needs these things. Like, no, I don't. They get into this whole kind of theological argument about the necessary steps for, salvation in the afterlife. And they're having it with this guy, presumably, right there, just like watching them argue. And Corby's ultimate opinion is, look, he needs to be baptized. You don't think he does. But if I baptize him, does that hurt him in any way, shape, or form?
Good point.
Does that jeopardize his faith, his condition? Does it condemn him to some circle of hell or something? And the guy's like, well, it's not going to hurt him. He's like, then what's the problem here? Mm-hmm. Let me just baptize him and let's just get over this.
Yeah.
And move on. And then you've done your thing. So if you're confident your thing is good enough, then it's good enough. And if I'm confident my thing's good enough, it's good enough. And either way, we're both covered.
Right.
There. And they have this kind of just a theological clash in there. So I think there's more at play than just some of the shared soldiers' feelings, at least among those intimate circles.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I don't see how that anecdote refutes anything that I said. That's just a philosophical difference, but it wasn't like, damn you, Corby, and then he stormed out or, hit him over the head with a Bible or something. It was just a philosophical disagreement, but it sounds like they weren't like enemies from that little story.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's fair to say.
But it sounds to me,
for you to say you're wrong, but
it sounds to me though that old Reverend Boots there was one of those guys that went online and got ordained for $25.
He gets a little certificate.
Yeah. I think but that's the thing is that not everybody that gets into any profession is like it's not always their vocation per se.
And again, that's the common thread that sets Father Corby aside in the eyes of those who experienced his ministry.
Yeah,
is he wasn't just this guy who came in and was like, I got a job to do, so let me go check on this guy, do the bare minimum with them, and then move on to a point where even the soldiers call you Boots, or give you you some nickname. They're like, this is Father William Corby. This is the respected man who's been in the front with us again. It's these little tangible details done over the space of multiple years.
Yeah.
In just the mud and the muck with these people.
I admire that.
That's what really elevates him.
There's I'm not a churchgoer. But I have respect for people who do get something out of that. I think everybody needs a crutch, and it's better to be church than heroin. It's the way I look at it. And whatever. But I think it was a story that I heard about Chamberlain, because he was also a preacher. Joshua Chamberlain, wasn't he?
He was a professor.
No, but he was a preacher too. Look that up, Cliff. Google it. Please. Just Joshua Chamberlain, read this Wikipedia thing. It'll be in there. I'm pretty sure he was or maybe it was his brother. No, I think it was his brother. Well, look it up anyway. Maybe they both were.
Say it wasn't in the movies.
Point is this, but he was still exactly. But the point is, I think he did have a strong faith.
Oh yeah,
Chamberlain. And there's a story about a soldier who is like tired on the march. And Chamberlain gets off his horse and takes the kid's gear and puts him on his horse. Did you ever hear this story?
No, I don't know that.
Have you ever heard that, Cliff?
No.
All right, now maybe it wasn't Chamberlain. I don't know. Somebody did that, and it impressed me because it's like that's a Christian thing to do. I mean, people are like, well, I'm not a Christian, but I would do that for somebody. All right, grow up. But.
You can do the right thing regardless of your faith.
Yes, it doesn't matter
thereof.
Exactly. Yes. But Christianity teaches that. But so. I admire a leader like that. And Corby, though he's not a military leader in the sense that he has a rank and he's given a unit to lead,
right.
He's still a leader of men.
Absolutely.
But he's their spiritual leader. Just as that whoever that officer was with that story was their military leader. Mm-hmm. That's what a leader should do. There was somebody who told me that there's a book I should read once called Leaders Eat Last. Have you ever heard of this book?
No. I like the title.
I did too, and I said, she's like, you got to read this book, Leaders Eat Last, and I'm like, done. And she's like, oh, you read it? And I go, no, but the title tells me everything I need to know.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, read it. And so I'm like, I'll get the audio version. So I listened to a couple chapters of it, and I was like, yeah, I understand this already. I don't need to read the damn book. And not to say that I'm a great leader, but the point I'm making there is that you got a guy who's in charge because that's the job he was given, and he did all of the brown nosing and hoop jumping through that was required of him to get there. And then there's the people who may not even ever get that rank.
Yeah.
But they are the leader among men. They're the one who men choose to follow, and they're the ones who take care of who are receptive to the well-being even ahead of time in anticipation. What do you got there, Cliff?
Okay, so let's see. He entered the Bangor Theological Seminary for 3 years of study. For 3 years of study, let's see. He was during his freshman and sophomore year.
Start that again.
Okay, hang on. Let me find it again.
Started the Bangor Seminary. Was it the 11th?
Yeah, he entered the Bangor Theological Seminary for 3 years of study. He also taught. I lost that one.
He also taught.
He taught Sunday school for his freshman and sophomore years, so he definitely had a foundation in Christianity.
It wasn't a reverend.
Wasn't like a preacher or a pastor or anything like that, but I think he had a pretty solid foundation in that, so probably a lot of his worldview.
And what about his brother John? Was he an actual reverend?
Haven't found that one.
All right, we'll look that one up next. Okay. I like having a Googler in the room. Yeah. Anyway, I admire that in people. All right, so after the Battle of Gettysburg, let's finish out the war and life of Father Corby.
Yeah. So given what we were talking about him being a military leader, he does have one moment. You
got something? Okay, Cliff, go ahead.
John C. Chamberlain was a Civil War chaplain for the 11th Maine and brother to Brigadier General Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain.
There you go. So I got a little bit confused there, but still, the faith was real with the Chamberlain boys.
So here we've just learned that Chamberlain's brother was Boots. Got to see pictures. He had big boots on. Maybe we got something here.
Yeah, maybe.
We can get an internal conspiracy theory.
My wife's ancestor was in the 11th Maine.
Well, maybe your wife's ancestor knew John Chamberlain there. Oh, you have to go look through the old family letters. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, so talking about him being like, you've got the designated leader and the functional leader in many ways. I think it's fair to say he's the morality leader, all those sorts of things. But he does have one solitary moment of military leadership purely by accident. So during the retreat from Gettysburg, he finds himself in the area of being the only soldier mounted. So he can see a little bit higher than everybody else can marching on foot. And he notices at one point in the distance, he sees what he suspects is kind of a Confederate line in the distance, kind of moving around to the side. Nobody else can see it at ground level, though. So he grabs an officer, basically like, get in my stirrups, look and see what I see. And sort of does, he's like, oh my God, and sends that message back. Some artillery fire starts coming on their position, and Corby and others is going to turn tail and really quickly start racing out of there in order to continue getting these messages as fast as you possibly can. So his opinion, we saved a potential massacre from happening in that area by just walking into an ambush.
Where was this?
So he doesn't give the location.
Oh.
It just says somewhere on the retreat.
Okay.
So likely down in Virginia is based. But again, he doesn't give specific of days. Again, because he doesn't emphasize the military.
Because that's not the point of his
kind
stories.
Of the one glimpse that he's going to give into it. But as he's turning and riding off from this moment, trying to get further help, he has a couple cavalry soldiers who kind of turned at that same moment with him. There's some orderlies who accompanied. So he's riding back to this broader bulk of units, which again, he doesn't say who they are. And picture the scene here. We've got Father Corby in a, for the most part, officer-looking uniform, galloping in frantically, what looks like a whole bunch of orderlies racing up behind him, and he arrives at like this wagon train. Seems like it had wounded or something in it. And soldier comes up to him, salutes, says, "General, where should I take these wagons to?" And Father Corby's brilliant statement, I love what he says. He says, "I did not undeceive him." I'm like, I'm not undeceiving you. So he didn't
I like
say
that
he
word,
was a general.
undeceive.
And he says, "Take them on to Fairfax."
Yeah.
He says like, I probably shouldn't have done that, but fundamentally, I know that was basically what was going to happen
Where
with
they're
them
going,
anyway.
yeah,
Like,
right.
Yes, sir. And then they continue off there. So he has like this one single moment where he gives an order, and the very next day, he finds himself in this general area again, where apparently he doesn't look as distinguished as he did galloping in with the orderlies. An enlisted man walks up to him and says, "Hold this horse for me here." And he just grabs it there because he looked like a loafer.
Yeah, he must have been in his long johns.
And one of the buddies who was with him had been in a tent right before that and came out hearing that moment and playing along from yesterday. He said, "General, pleasure to see you again." That man took off with his horse real fast. And like, I just asked a general to hold my horse. So there is a strong sense of humor. Kind of that's unraveling here.
Well, that's the Irish side, of course.
Yeah.
There's that dark humor in dark times.
And I think you have to.
You have to.
You have to get through these moments. Again, for everything he tells us about, there's got to be a dozen things he didn't describe.
One time somebody told me that they're like, "Your show's good, but I just kind of cringe every time that you guys, laugh and, throw in a little humor there because, it's a very serious thing." I said, "Yeah, and that's why we do the humor, because it's a very serious thing." And I said, "And by the way, you should just go and find some veterans and talk to them and listen to their humor, or go find somebody that works as an EMT or a police officer or a fireman and listen to their humor. The very people that you're thinking we're dishonoring by joking while talking about what they did have the sickest sense of humor you'll ever hear in your life. And I love it."
Yeah.
I wish on this show we could get away with the things that these people say. Oh my God, I would love to have a show where we could just be as disgusting as we could possibly be. But we can't. We can't, unfortunately, because no one would listen to that.
Even Father Corby needs some outlets.
Absolutely.
We don't know what those are. We don't know how he handled it, but there has to have been some type.
Are you Catholic?
I am not.
So I went to Catholic school, and I was very surprised to find the human side of the priests and the nuns. One priest, when I was older as an adult, I bumped into one at a funeral, and I said, "Oh, you remember me? I went to go, oh yeah, I remember you. And so we went and got dinner one time, and we were catching up, so what did you do since 8th grade and all that stuff. And, the last time I saw this guy, I was an 8th grader, and he was treating me like an educator would treat a student, very professional, very proper. And then we're sitting there and he's having scotch with me and he's cursing up a blue streak. And I was like, I didn't know what to make of it. I was like 37 years old and I had no idea what to make of this, but like they're people too,
Absolutely.
So Father Corby, for all you know, he was smoking cigars and gambling with prostitutes and telling dirty jokes for all we know.
I would
Probably
like to be very
not.
clear that was Matt's voice. That was not me saying.
Nobody's confusing our voices here, Mr. Golden Throat. No, so I'm just saying that you never know what it would have been, and nobody is the statue that we all make them out to be.
Right. You've got to have those outlets. We just have to speculate on what some of those outlets may have been or how they may have manifested.
Yeah.
Because he is dealing through a lot, and after Gettysburg is almost where it's going to get worse for him.
Go ahead. Tell us.
Going into eventually the Overland Campaign, he says there were way too many people for me to take care of, and talking of the wounded and the death all around him. In later 1863, he goes through a whole series of executions that happened, which just exhaust him and tax him emotionally. One of the guys he describes saying, I was so profoundly moved and questioned my state of being because this man just laid there groaning all night long, knowing he was going to the firing squad the next day. That is, for me, the most powerful moments in his memoirs, how many executions he is responsible for the final days for these people in this thing. And that moment, like, there's a lot of people who need me right now, but I am solely focused on this guy.
Yeah.
As they're crying, as they're begging, as they're pleading, or some of them, meeting death, favorably and just kind of at peace. I'm trying to get them at peace with everything. And one poor soul that he is going to meet with. This guy's just upsetting what happens to him. So the firing squad is waiting for him after they've gone through all their things. Said he laid on the ground. He bedewed the ground with his tears, Corby shall say, during their hours.
What great language.
I know. People don't talk like this.
Bedewed.
Like, we're going to bring it back.
Yeah, let's bring it back.
We'll bring it back.
I like that.
But he says these 12 loaded muskets are out there waiting for him as they, get him tied up with a whole army, not the whole army, but a big section of it, brought around because it's public. This one has to be public for it to have its maximum effect there. Corby walks this man up there, gives him his final rites. Here's those last words, tells him basically, don't say any more, let's just meet death with honor and in the condition that you are. 11 of the guns are loaded. So that way no one truly knows if they're the one who did it or not.
Except you know the difference when you fire a blank. You could feel it.
I think that might have been more psychologically than anything. It's like, well, maybe there's a chance I just made up, kick or something.
Yeah.
It says all 11 bullets plowed into this man.
Yeah.
And the man still was alive. And just so they're like, that would just be like a stunningly traumatic scene.
Yeah.
So the provost marshal just has to walk over with everybody. No doubt. I bet no one wanted to watch what's going on, no matter whether this is official discipline or not, and the provost marshal has to pull out his revolver and finish him off in front of everything. And it's just these moments.
And this is your own guy.
This
isn't the enemy.
This is a United States soldier, for whatever reason.
Your own guy. Yeah, oh my God, that's awful.
This sort of stuff is going to take Corby into having meetings with super prominent people over this. He meets with General Hooker. He meets with George Meade on the subject. He meets with Abraham Lincoln talking about these executions and others. And Meade is going to tell him in one of their post-Gettysburg conversations, like maybe to set it up, this is Corby trying to get a petition to get a guy off of death row, which takes him to Lincoln when some soldiers are going to petition him to go out and talk to Lincoln. Lincoln's going to say, basically, I'm not going to commute him, but I'm willing to pardon him if General Meade will also pardon him. So the logical step for Corby then is hop back on that train from D.C., rejoin the Army, meet with General Meade. And General Meade is going to say, basically, I don't know why President Lincoln did that. He has the authority to pardon, not I. And Meade is going to say, the reason we are doing this is because the previous generals did not properly enforce discipline. And if we'd had a harder series of rules, organization, and discipline early on, we wouldn't have to be doing this. And because Lincoln's not going to do it, I'm not going to step in. Says, but you can use my military wires to send that back to Lincoln if you want, but nothing happens of it. The death just continues growing, and Corby keeps walking these men to the end.
That's got to be more taxing than the actual battle stuff that you go through.
He says straight up, yes. He says these moments are worse than the battle.
Yes.
Because, in a battle, whether you want to or not, everyone accepts a level of responsibility. This might be my end, and I, therefore, am also responsible for possibly causing the end of others. This is a moment, even if it's military discipline, that is much harder to deal with, much harder to watch, much harder probably to enforce.
Sure.
Very few people would want to do that. Corby witnesses so many of these scenes, and a heartbreaking one of them, he's going to be walking the condemned to a gallows. This guy is being hung as opposed to being shot. And when he walks into the gallows, Corby was on a horse, had him up there together. So he hops off his horse and he has to hand the reins to a soldier at the gallows. And the soldier that he's going to hand the reins to was the brother of the condemned man.
Oh, God.
So when you're right there, you see the chaplain and your brother going, and you know what's happening. You just have to hold that horse there. And he describes this moment, and then the condemned, is going to go up on there. The events will take place. He says, what Corby remembered most fondly is not the death of this man, who Corby is going to say he met death honorably. He was prepared. He was in solid faith of his future. He says, the wail that his brother let out at that moment of dropping.
Of course. Oh,
and you're sitting there
God.
holding the chaplain's horse, and you're just supposed to go on with military life after that point. And that is your brother, whether baby brother, older brother, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
That continues to layer these things on. The bonds developed between soldiers who serve together is significant enough. But then you layer on literal biological relationships on it, just compounding things. Like, this is the sort of stuff that Corby brings to light to us, the underbelly of the Army that we all know happened.
Sure.
But we don't often hear in this level of detail from the emotional side of things, because men in the 19th century men in general don't talk about their emotions a whole lot. Corby is bringing all of that, your most basic fears and doubts, and often he changes the names to protect these people. So
that is such a
pinpoint. We can't say it was this person because he doesn't want some of those stories to leak out and embarrass others.
I just can't imagine that. Like, I can't imagine, you hear these stories of brothers or cousins or fathers and sons going off and fighting in the same regiment, and one goes down, and, what's that like? That's got to be just as traumatizing. But to stand there, feet away from your brother as he's being executed, holding the chaplain's horse.
Every fiber of this man's being must have wanted to do something.
Oh, my God.
Step in within military discipline and other things at play. It's like, what's the right answer here? Is the right answer allowing him to die for the broader sense of this patriotic duty?
No, at that point, and you'll pardon my French, I would be like, fuck this country. I don't want my brother dying like this for this country just because of what? What was the guy's offense? Do you remember?
That specific one, I don't remember.
Yeah.
No, Corby doesn't give the offenses of most. There's only one occasion I can recall where he gives the offense.
God, I couldn't imagine that. That is terrible. Yeah, and to think too, from Father Corby's perspective, if you're the one if you're the condemned, this is maybe it's your first encounter with Father Corby, and he's being nice to you and kind to you, and he's your last friend. Mm-hmm. But for Father Corby, your 10th, 11th, 12th, however many he had to do, and it's just like that has got to weigh on you because that you are literally this person's last friend on earth.
Yeah.
You're his family. I mean, you're his comfort. Everybody else around you has turned their back on him. They have condemned him to death.
Corby represents everything about their life that was positive.
Yes.
He's probably also maybe the last physical touch they're going to feel.
Right.
Other than maybe the hood going over the head or so.
Yeah.
Other than the order to fire or the order to, drop the plank. Corby's the last friendly voice that these people will ever hear. He's the one who devoted those last few hours with him, maybe last few days. Like, he is your everything, and sometimes you've known him for years. Most of the time in these execution situations, somebody you've just met. Mm. But he is then also maybe the most important person in your entire journey because depending on your belief structure, he may also be the one guaranteeing you a broader sense of eternity.
Yeah.
And then he's also the one who's going to tell your mom and your dad, your brothers, your friends, whatever. He's going to be the one to tell them what happened, and he will control that story, how it is phrased out. So.
He's Andy Gibb. I just want to be your everything. Anyway, so the war ends for Father Corby.
Yeah.
He goes back to Notre Dame, right?
Correct. Yeah, it ends a little bit earlier for him than most folks. He leaves in 64 because Father Soren pulls him back to Notre Dame.
Okay. So, and that was okay to do? The Army would let you just go?
Yeah, well, so for this role of the chaplains, yes.
Okay.
That was acceptable to do because it was understood you have the military role, but you also have this ecclesiastical role.
Right, okay.
And with the other chaplains having left before that, leaving Corby alone, it's not because they all couldn't hack it. Some of them had been pulled back. Because, again, Father Soren and others are still running this university, still has multiple congregations that they're responsible for. Lots of needs in their local community aside from a war. So he pulls Corby back in 64, goes back home. Corby tries to rejoin in 65, briefly kind of hanging around. But effectively, the war is over for Corby by that point, though it's by no means over for his men. So he's not involved in Appomattox. A lot of the stuff post-64 he's not writing about because he's not there.
Not there, yeah.
He's back and is made vice president of Notre Dame by 65.
So he's vice president of Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. What now? Okay. I don't know if I asked you this last time you were in, but I've heard this story. I heard it from a guide 15, 20 years ago. And at least as I internalize the story, it goes like this. Father Corby is president, vice president of Notre Dame. Now, I know this is bull because they didn't have a football team, but the story I heard was that he goes to give a blessing to the football team before a game, and he throws upon them or gives them the moniker the Fighting Irish and says, now you are the Fighting Irish. And then I don't remember who I was talking to recently, but they go, well, that's bull because he was dead before, or he wasn't at Notre Dame when they had a football team or something like that. Where do they get it's a French school.
Yeah.
Where does Fighting Irish come from? Does it come from the Irish Brigade? Do you know this?
So I don't know that it's been established 100%, but all smart people affirm that it most likely came from the Irish Brigade, specifically the 69th. So the Fighting Irish.
Okay, so but does Corby have anything to do with that?
I don't believe so.
So it's a later generation looking back on the school's heritage. Maybe they see the link with Corby.
I think
Okay.
That's how I would understand it. I've never seen something expressly in Corby's words or letters making reference to that. He was known as the fighting chaplain, and so maybe coming back and later being president and other things with a broad contingent of Irish fathers and others around, I think it kind of naturally progressed. And he's very significant in veterans associations, memorializations, so I think he helped to keep that central focus of the Fighting Irish highlighted.
Cliff, could you Google where did Notre Dame get the name Fighting Irish, please? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so anything of note then, besides not giving them the name Fighting Irish, anything of note from his tenure after the war at Notre Dame?
Sure, so he's vice president by 1865, and then the president of Notre Dame dies unexpectedly, which makes Corby by 1866 the third president.
Little coincidental. Okay, what else?
Actually, I remember who his buddy is. He sets up the law school there. He really helps to grow it. Then he's going to step aside. At that point, he's going to be asked to go take over another school up in Wisconsin. Leaves Notre Dame, goes up there, get its sound financial footing for 5 years or so. And then he comes back in 1877 to become the sixth president of Notre Dame because the guy before him, Father Colvin, they said he was a little too Irish for Notre Dame. He got a little bit out of control in those understandings around St. Patrick's Day celebration. And he did not he personally, but he did not control the discipline of the students.
Okay.
And that's where I think this connection with Father Soren comes back in, as well as Corby's origins, that he was more Catholic than he was Irish in the eyes of Father Soren.
I see.
So he would be able to enforce a solid Catholic discipline, the academic rigors, without getting lost in some of kind of the stereotyped, what's the word? Like
stuff,
extra stuff layered on top of that celebration.
Yeah.
So Corby comes back in to be that president again for a few years until he hits an ecclesiastical issue and said, you can either be president or you continue serving in your parish. And he says, I want to stay as president. Father Soren says, I need you in the parish. And he then steps down as president in 1881.
Okay.
But remains deeply involved, rising in various provincial roles, gets increasingly higher responsibilities. In the Church of the Holy Cross, that's the order that he's a part of. And he's responsible for hundreds of ministers by the 1880s into the 1890s, and he is traveling constantly because of that, checking in on folks not directly involved in leadership in Notre Dame, but still directly involved in trying to keep their focus. He sets up the GAR operation that's down there. He joins Mollis. He joins the Second Corps Volunteers Association, the Irish Brigade Association. He's constantly connected in these post-war world while moving around the broader sense of his Catholic world and taking a very significant leadership role, not just in one parish, but for hundreds of full-time ministers with hundreds of thousands, millions of people under them. Corby rises to be a pretty significant guy in the broader sense in terms of the Catholic Church that's emerging here. But he's got one foot in the war the entire time, though.
How, where, and when does he die?
He dies in 1897.
Oh.
So he lives quite
a while.
Significant journey there. He's into his 60s there. But before he dies, one last thing that I think we'd be remiss if we didn't get into. He gets a letter in 1888 that invites him to come back to Gettysburg and to be here for the 25th anniversary of it, which comes and says, I couldn't refuse such an invitation. This is where they're going to dedicate, not the Corby Memorial, that one's much later, but what's often called the Irish Brigade Monument. You know, the one that kept the cross there with the wolf.
The one right behind you.
There you go.
There it is. Yeah.
There you go, miniature version. So Corby's present for it, and he gives this fantastic statement while he's there, referencing back the amount of loss that they have sustained in it. I want to find the exact quote that he's going to use.
Do you want battle ambience?
No battle ambience for this one. To say, because
I have some queued up.
Here it is. So in this address with that monument right next to me, he says, here is what is left of us. Where are the others?
Oh.
It says, and then he choked up at that moment. All these veterans around him began just weeping around that. Just that reminder, there's 500 and something of them at Gettysburg. We're going to lose several more here, and that's 200. Not even the end of the war.
Yeah.
And now by this point in the 1880s, many of those who would have survived the war are likely have left us, and those usually we're here remembering this space. And he's like, there used to be a lot more of us.
Yeah.
It's a very poignant moment for him. But that spurs him into writing his memoirs in the early 1890s. And by 1897, taking us back to his death here, he goes on this big trip. For part of his work, comes back from this trip with a cold. This cold turns into pneumonia for him. He starts getting super sick. And on December 28th, 1897, he is going to pass away. He is going to die there. And when he passes, his body is laid in kind of the central hall of the university, has candles all around it there. Again, this is the fighting chaplain. They'd made petitions. His veterans who'd served under him tried to get him the Medal of Honor. Even previous to that moment, he was the bravest of the brave. He was the best chaplain imaginable. He was in the front with us. He had bullets flying around him. He saw the horror and the muck in combat, and he saw a lot of stuff that we didn't see. But when his body is then being moved for burial, it's placed on a hearse, taken to the cemetery right along a little patch of water there. And it was the custom that priests in the Church of the Holy Cross, your casket would be carried by fellow priests or fathers, others. In this case, his casket is being carried by GAR veterans, soldiers who served him. It is draped with the flag of the old 88th on it. And as they are lowering him into the ground, volleys ring off. He's getting a military burial. Again, unusual for a priest. It says snow is falling on the ground. This is the last day of 1897. And as his soldiers, what's left of them, are lowering him into the ground, it's the final shot, the final bugle blow for the fighting chaplain, as Father Corby now goes to join so many of those he was responsible for their condition, hoping now perhaps to be meeting with them in that broader sense of eternity. And Father Corby's gone the last day in 1897, buried in the ground out in Indiana.
Beautiful. Not going to add anything to that. Spoken like a true ranger. I like the way you did that. That was total ranger style, and it's great. It's time to take a break. We'll take a break. We'll come back on the other side. Cliff, do you have the answer to the question? Just yes or no, Cliff?
Yes.
Okay, then. Well, all right, maybe so. All right, well, whatever. Well, after the break, we'll come back. We'll start with that, and then we have only 2 questions from the listeners here, because I don't think a lot of people knew enough about Father Corby to formulate questions. So anyway, we'll see what it is. We'll take a break and be right back after these words.
Who can forget the sounds of the 60s?
The 1860s. I can't, and you can't either. Now, there's Marching Through Georgia, the exciting new album by Billy Webster. All of your favorite hits of the 1860s in one place. Such hits as Garry Owens, The Battle Hymn of the Republic, All Quiet Along the Potomac Tonight, Marching Through Georgia, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Go to billysongs.com and order your digital download of Billy Webster's Marching Through Georgia today. That's billysongs.com.
Attention all aficionados of Union Civil War music, your ensemble awaits. The National Association of Civil War Musicians, founded by the Grand Army of the Republic, serves as a beacon for those who cherish the notes that stirred a nation. Our association is a hub where the scores of the past are preserved and the spirit of camaraderie persists. Immerse yourself in the melodies that played through history. For example, take July 3rd, 1863. As Lee's cannons unleashed a maelstrom, the Philadelphia Brigade Band exemplified valor. Positioned at the heart of the onslaught, their music defied the cacophony of the largest artillery barrage in North American history. Their presence was a deliberate symbol. If the band could stand tall and play, then the infantrymen can lay in wait to hold that crucial ground. Today, we keep this and other memories alive. No matter if you sound the fife, beat the drum, or swell the brass, your contribution breathes life into our mission. Let's commemorate, collaborate, and preserve together. Step forward and join the ranks today. Visit nacwm.org. That's nacwm.org. The National Association of Civil War Musicians, honoring all the brave soldiers who dared to wage a war with only an instrument.
Movies and documentaries about history are spread out across the internet, and their quality is often suspect. History Fix delivers curated historic programming to your preferred device using their website or branded apps. Join History Fix for movies, documentaries, short films, and how-tos. Content covers historic eras ranging from the 1st to the 21st centuries. Their team of curators brings you the most comprehensive and authentic historical content available. Addressing Gettysburg podcast fans receive 20% off their first annual subscription. So what are you waiting for? Sign up at www.historyfix.com and use promo code ADGBURG. That's ADGBURG. Every subscription begins with a 7-day risk-free trial. And after signing up, download the History Fix app on your smartphone. So go to www.historyfix.com and use promo code ADGBURG, that's ADGBURG, on an annual subscription. Escape into history with History Fix.
If you're a lover of history, then go to trhistorical.com. There, you'll find apparel, drinkware, decor, and more, featuring a wide range of subjects from the ancient world to the Cold War. Looking to make an impression with the perfect gift? Well, TR Historical now offers a vintage wrapping service for a truly unique presentation. And our listeners will save 15% when using promo code GBURG1863 at checkout. So go to trhistorical.com. TR Historical, for the love of history.
For the Historian has a wide variety of titles, new and used, of military books from publishers like Osprey, Gettysburg Publishing, Stackpole, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more. I make it a point to go there once a week because I have new bookshelves to fill and I never know what treasures I'll find, and neither will you. They even have toy soldiers, model kits, games, children's books, and more. So stop by and check them out on your next visit to Gettysburg, or better yet, order right now online at forthehistorian.com and mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund you your shipping. And if you call 717-685-5207 or stop by the store on your next visit and mention us, you'll get 20% off retail price. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207.
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum, is housed in the historic Lutheran Seminary building constructed in 1832, a witness to the first day of battle. The museum's 3 floors of exhibits connect visitors to the dilemmas that led to the Civil War, provide a powerful and personal view of the battle's first day, and explore one of the battlefield's largest hospitals. No visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center is complete without a guided tour of the building's famous cupola, where on the eve of battle, officers and civilians saw thousands of Confederate soldiers' campfires burning to the west, and Brigadier General John Buford watched for vital federal reinforcements as fighting erupted on the morning of July 1st. Today, you can stand where Buford stood and discover how this view helped chart the course of the Battle of Gettysburg. Your trip to Gettysburg is not complete without a serious visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum. Purchase tickets online at seminaryridgemuseum.org or call 717-339-1300.
To get tickets or a cupola tour, listeners may call or walk in and mention Addressing Gettysburg, or by ordering online using the promo code AG1863 for 20% off.
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. It began here.
There's a devil to pay.
Hey, Gettysburg business owners. Winter is just around the bend, and you know what that means. No tourists. But just because people aren't coming to you doesn't mean you can't bring your business to them. If you ship, you're still in the game. And if you're a seasonal business, the time to advertise for your next season is in the off-season when people are making their plans. So what's an affordable yet highly effective way of reaching those people? Well, it's not radio. It's not TV, and it's certainly not print. Step out of the Jurassic era of advertising and run an ad on Addressing Gettysburg. We just reached 1 million downloads, and we're growing by the tens of thousands every month. Beyond that, our audience is happy to support those who support their favorite podcast. So email sales@addressinggettysburg for more information about advertising on our show. We look forward to helping your business grow. That's sales@addressinggettysburg.com.
Civil War Trails is the world's largest open-air museum, offering over 1,500 sites and stories for you to explore. Each Civil War Trails site has an interpretive sign to help fuel your imagination as you stand on remote mountaintop artillery positions, in fields where thundering cavalry charges took place, or in now quiet downtowns where raids, riots, or raiders shattered the peace. Over 60 Civil War Trail sites allow you to stand in the footsteps of the Gettysburg Campaign across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and of course, Pennsylvania. In fact, they are expanding further into Pennsylvania now with the latest sites in Wrightsville, Hanover, and Chambersburg. As you travel the trail, you'll find more than just great history. Beyond battlefields, great barbecue, beer, and bourbon await. Here's a pro tip. Carry cash and never book your day completely to ensure that you can take that gravel road, explore that hiking trail, or pick up an amazing artifact from that awesome antique shop you find along the way. Request a free brochure shipped right to your door at civilwartrails.org, and be sure to snap a hashtag sign selfie next time you are out exploring. Click the link to Civil War Trails in our show notes. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
All right, and we are back to the sound of a distant skirmish going on. The thing that you all have been holding your breath for is the answer to our question. But first, before that, if you want to submit questions to an Ask a Gettysburg Guide, you have to go to patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. Of course, the link is probably in the show description. And notice how I say probably. It's because I do it, and I can't rely on my own work. So it most likely, but may not be. But it's patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. Go in there and become a supporter of the show. Help us keep this going and contribute to the show by submitting questions ahead of time. And also you get discounts on ticketed events and early access to it and a whole lot more. Kvin Bryant is with us. And Kevin, before we get to you with the question from our listener, go ahead, Cliff. What do you got?
So there are a couple of different theories. There isn't one in particular. There is some discussion about the relation to Father Corby being associated with the school and the Irish Brigade. The other one is just the fact that it was a Catholic school, so it drew a lot of Irish students. But it looked like the first use of the term for their sports teams came around 1910 or so.
1910. Okay, yeah. So it's not as old as I was led to believe there. Okay, but
what? That may also give us our more direct Corby connection, because in 1910 is when the Corby statue was placed here on Gettysburg. 1911 when it's placed in Notre Dame.
All right, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Stephen Byers is our listener who submitted the questions today, and he says, first, I know Father Corby has a duplicate monument at Notre that is affectionately called Fair Catch Corby. Are there any other monuments to Father Corby, of course, besides here at Gettysburg, that you're aware of?
So there's only the two statues,
okay,
to the best of my knowledge.
Statues. Why'd you...
Monuments take many shapes and forms.
Okay, but you know of something else.
So there's also, I understand there's some plaques that are here in Gettysburg at St. Francis Xavier Church that speak of Father Corby.
See, I did not know that.
I have not seen them personally.
Okay.
I've been told by sources.
My friend goes there. I'll have to ask her to check for it. And then his second question is: Are there any book recommendations on Father Corby or the Irish Brigade that you would recommend we listeners read?
So I would defer too much on talking about Irish Brigade books, because again, I would not consider myself an expert on that.
Sure.
The one that I would reference, though, that I think is relevant for us is an Irish Brigade history written by D.P. Conyngham, I think his name, Conyn. So it's a weird spelling.
Conyngham.
Yeah, I might be kind of butchering that pronunciation.
Wait, how is it spelled?
Conyn is the start of it.
Oh, Conyngham?
Yeah.
Conyngham?
Yeah, it's from 1867.
Interesting. Okay.
On it. It's called The Irish Brigade and Its Campaigns. So the only reason that I suggest that one, not saying that it's the best in scholarship, realistically it's probably not, given by when it came from, but it's the one that many of the veterans, including Father Corby, cite as the one they used to inspire their memories and things. So I often feel that's like a harder level of expectations. Nowadays, things are written and we can all dissect it because we have access to so much stuff that earlier generations didn't live through. But to write a book for the generation who experienced it, I think is very different sort of scenario. So I would suggest that, again, not because it's necessarily the best book on the Irish Brigade, but in terms of books about Corby, to my knowledge, there are no biographies that exist of him. So the key thing, though, which I think everybody should get, regardless, any student of Gettysburg should have his memoirs.
Yeah, what's the name of the memoir?
It is Memoirs of Chaplain Life by Father Corby.
Okay. Memoirs.
He publishes it in 1893. It is an amazing look. Again, it's not going to go deep into the weeds here in Gettysburg because that's not what Corby's writing for. But it is that drive into the everyday soldier, which is something kind of in vogue nowadays, and rightfully so.
Sure.
In the studies, Corby's doing that before it was cool to be doing that. He's telling you, I want you to know the men and their names and the good and bad, their doubts, their hopes, all that.
Right.
It's an amazing glimpse at the war, but also, before and after stuff and the purpose of coming in. He has a whole chapter on the Gettysburg reunion in 1888 that he's here for. Huh. It's a really good look, and you can find it where all good books are sold.
Okay, cool.
Just that one memoir of Corby.
And, of course, ladies and gentlemen, check at For the Historian first to see if they have it, and you can mention Addressing Gettysburg and get a 20% discount, of course. Kevin, thank you very much for coming back on the show. Always good to have you on. You're a great storyteller, and I don't, your voice is great. You got a great voice for radio. What can I say? Game has to recognize game, and if I had game, I would recognize it in you. But I recognize that you've got something that I had to work at. God just gave it to you. I had to cultivate mine, and still, it's not even anywhere close to yours. So that's it. Cliff, thanks for Googling there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Steve Byers, thanks for sending in your question. Patrons, thanks for being patrons. And if there's anybody else who I forgot to thank you for being you. And I don't know why I was looking at the camera there because we don't have the camera going, but whatever. That's it for this show. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Stop by and say hi to Father Corby next time you're in town, and maybe he will give you final absolution. All right. Goodbye. All right. We are free. We are free.
Are you a reenactor or living historian? Or maybe you're a War of Rights player and want to bring esprit de corps to your team. Well, then you need the Badge Maker, the leading provider of Civil War and other historical badges and insignias. Mention this ad with an attached message in your order and receive a free surprise gift. I myself bought a metal Second Corps badge, and it always starts a conversation when I wear it. So hit up the Badge Maker at civilwarcorpsbadges.com. Something for everyone and anyone.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Garry, Owen, and glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man for that shall go to jail from Garry, Owen, and glory. Instead of spa or drink down